My name is Eric Hudson. I'm 37 years old, and until recently, I would have described my life as steady, predictable, solid. I live in a quiet suburb outside Minneapolis where the lawns are trimmed on schedule and people wave when they pull out of their driveways. I work as an infrastructure project engineer. My job revolves around stability, load calculations, long-term durability, building systems that can withstand pressure for decades. I used to think my marriage operated the same way. This didn't begin with a feeling. It didn't begin with suspicion or jealousy. It began with a number. It was a Tuesday night. Nothing dramatic about it. I was at the kitchen island, laptop open, reviewing invoices for a municipal drainage project. Sophia was upstairs on a work call. We keep a shared banking app, have for years. It's not about control. It's about logistics. Mortgage, utilities, travel reimbursements. We've always operated like partners. I logged in to make sure a contractor payment cleared. That's when I saw it. $1,842.67. The Langford House, Chicago. Late check-in fee included. Reservation. Sophia Hudson. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Fraud, maybe. I even refreshed the app twice. Same line item. Same amount. Same hotel. The Langford House isn't some roadside chain. It's a boutique hotel downtown Chicago. Exposed brick, rooftop lounge, the kind of place companies use to impress clients, or the kind of place people book when they want privacy wrapped in luxury. Sophia had told me she was at a corporate seminar in Rochester that week, 2 hours south. She'd mentioned bad coffee and uncomfortable chairs. I remember joking that I could design a better conference center blindfolded. Chicago is not Rochester. I didn't react immediately. I didn't call her out. I didn't jump to conclusions. I closed the app and sat there for a while, staring at the reflection of the kitchen lights in the dark window. My brain started building explanations for her. Maybe the seminar relocated. Maybe it was a billing error. Maybe she used a corporate card and something got misrouted. By the time she came downstairs, I had convinced myself there was a reasonable answer. She looked normal. That was the unsettling part. She wore gray slacks and the navy blouse I bought her last Christmas. Her hair was tied back loosely, like she'd been running her fingers through it during meetings. She smiled when she saw me. "You're still working?" she asked. "Yeah," I said casually. "Just finishing something up." She grabbed a glass of water and leaned against the counter. Comfortable. At ease. No visible tension. I took a breath. "Hey, quick thing. I was checking the account earlier. What's the charge from the Langford House in Chicago?" I kept my voice neutral. Curious. Not accusatory. There was a pause. Not long. Maybe half a second. But it was there. Her hand tightened around the glass. "Are you serious right now?" she said, exhaling sharply. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't clarification. It was irritation. "I'm just asking," I replied. "It was connected to the seminar. They shifted part of it. I told you it might run longer." "You said Rochester." She rolled her eyes. "It routed through Chicago. Eric, it's business travel. Things change." Her tone carried something else now. Annoyance, like I'd asked something invasive. "Okay," I said slowly. "I just didn't know you stayed overnight there." And then everything flipped. "You know what? This is exactly the problem." I blinked. "What problem?" "You track everything. Every purchase. Every detail. It's exhausting." I stared at her, genuinely confused. "It's our joint account. That doesn't mean you need to audit me." Audit. The word hit hard. Like I was her supervisor, not her husband. "I wasn't auditing you," I said carefully. "It was a big charge. I just wanted context." She shook her head, pacing slightly now. "You're overly attached to every move I make. It's suffocating." The conversation had somehow turned inside out. I was no longer asking about a hotel. I was defending my character. "I don't think asking about $1,800 makes me suffocating." "You're clingy, Eric." There it was. Clingy. I actually felt heat rise to my face. Not anger, embarrassment, shame. As if I'd crossed a line without realizing it. You're too dependent on constant reassurance, she continued. You need to know where I am, what I'm doing, who I'm with. It's not healthy. I searched my memory. Had I been doing that? I work 50-hour weeks. I barely have time to micromanage my own schedule. I trust you, I said, and I meant it, or I thought I did. Then act like it. She grabbed her phone off the counter and walked toward the stairs. Maybe give me space instead of interrogating me. Interrogating. That word lingered even more than clingy. By the time she reached the bedroom, I was left standing in the kitchen feeling like I'd committed some kind of emotional offense. I replayed my tone in my head. Was it sharp? Was I suspicious? I couldn't find any hostility in it. Later that night, we lay in bed facing opposite directions. I don't want to fight, she said softly in the dark. I don't either. Then stop making me feel like I'm on trial. On trial. I swallowed. I'm not trying to control you, I said quietly. I just wanted clarity. She sighed, like she was the tired one. You need to work on your insecurity. And just like that, the charge disappeared from the conversation entirely. Now it was about me. I lay awake long after her breathing evened out. I stared at the ceiling fan rotating slowly above us and tried to reconcile two conflicting realities. The factual inconsistency of Chicago versus Rochester, and the emotional conviction in her voice when she called me clingy. My brain kept returning to the numbers. $1,842.67. Late check-in. Late check-in means someone arrived after hours. Why would a seminar reroute without notice? Why hadn't she mentioned it in passing? We texted during that trip. Nothing about Chicago. Nothing about a different hotel. I unlocked my phone and pulled up the banking app again. Brightness low so it wouldn't wake her. There it was. The Langford house. I zoomed in on the transaction details. The timestamp showed 11:43 p.m. What seminar ends at midnight? I locked my phone and set it face down. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had become too attached, too rigid. Engineers like certainty. Maybe I was just uncomfortable with variables. But something deeper unsettled me. It wasn't just the charge. It was how quickly she attacked instead of explaining. If the answer was simple, why make me feel guilty for asking? By morning, she was back to normal. Coffee brewed. News on the TV. A quick kiss before she left for work. Love you, she said casually. Love you too. The word felt heavier than usual. As she pulled out of the driveway, I stood at the window longer than necessary. Not watching her leave, just watching the space she left behind. I told myself to drop it. But facts don't disappear just because someone reframes them. And that night, when I was alone in the quiet house, I realized something that scared me more than the hotel charge. For the first time in 11 years, I wasn't sure if I knew my own wife. And somehow, I felt like I was the one who needed to apologize for noticing. After that night, I told myself I would let it go. That's what secure husbands do, right? They don't spiral over a hotel charge. They don't dissect timestamps. They don't question their wife's tone shifts. They trust. But here's the thing about facts. They don't evaporate just because someone calls you clingy. The next few days, I moved through life on autopilot. I went to work, sat through budget meetings, signed off on structural revisions. On the outside, I was the same guy, calm, methodical, reliable. On the inside, I was rewinding the last 6 months like surveillance footage. Started small. Sophia had changed her phone password sometime in early spring. I remember because one night I grabbed her phone off the counter to check the weather while mine was charging. The screen didn't unlock. Did you change it? I'd asked casually. Yeah, she'd replied without looking up from the sink. Company security update. I hadn't questioned it. People change passwords. That's normal. Except she used to tell me everything. Not because I asked, because she wanted to. We had that kind of openness. At least I thought we did. Then came the workouts. Around April, she started going to evening fitness classes. At first, it was twice a week. Then it became 4 times. Sometimes 5. She'd leave around 7 p.m. and return after 9:30, flushed and energized. How was class? I'd ask. Good. Intense. she'd say, already heading for the shower. One night I offered to join. She hesitated. It's kind of my thing, she said. I just need something that's mine. That should have been my first real pause. Because we never used to need separate things in a defensive way. We both had independent interests, sure, but there was never territorial energy behind them. I started noticing she kept her phone face down. Not sometimes. Always. Even at dinner. And when notifications came through, she'd tilt the screen away slightly before reading them. Once, I walked into the living room unexpectedly, and she locked her screen so fast it almost slipped from her hand. Everything okay? I asked. Yeah, just work stuff. Work stuff at 10:47 p.m. on a Saturday. There were new dresses, too. Sophia has always had good taste, but she's practical. Lately, packages were arriving weekly. Silk blouses, fitted black dresses, heels she didn't need for her office job. You've been shopping, I'd said lightly. She shrugged. Trying something new. Is that allowed? The way she said it, defensive like I'd criticized her, made me back off instantly. Then there was the jacket. One night I grabbed her coat to hang it up and caught a faint scent that wasn't mine. Not detergent. Not perfume. Cologne. Subtle. Woody. Definitely not something I owned. I stood there longer than I should have, inhaling like a detective in a bad crime show. When I mentioned it later, she laughed. You're imagining things. I was in an elevator with like 5 guys after a meeting. That explanation had felt reasonable at the time. Now it felt rehearsed. The calendar disappearance might have been the biggest red flag of all. For years, we shared a digital calendar. Appointments, travel, birthdays. Suddenly, it stopped updating. When I asked about a missing event, she said she'd streamlined her scheduling. It's easier if I just manage mine separately. Separate. That word again. Plans started getting canceled. Dinner with friends? Too tired. Weekend trip to Duluth? Rain check. But when I came home early once, I found her blow-drying her hair at 8 p.m. Thought you were exhausted, I said. She looked startled. I am. Just needed to feel put together. Put together for who? The most disturbing part wasn't any single incident. It was the cold calmness whenever I tried to bridge the distance. I feel like we're drifting. I told her one Sunday afternoon. She didn't get emotional. She didn't argue. She just looked at me with mild annoyance. You overthink everything, Eric. That phrase became her shield. Overthink. Clingy. Suffocating. Every concern I raised got reframed as my flaw. And I started to question myself. Was I projecting? Was this just normal evolution in a long marriage? People change. Careers grow. Independence expands. But independence doesn't usually require secrecy. The night that finally unsettled me beyond repair was 2 weeks after the hotel charge. She came home later than usual, close to 11. Her cheeks were flushed, not from cold. Her energy was different, almost buoyant. You seem in a good mood, I said carefully. Good workout. She moved past me, kissed my cheek quickly, and headed upstairs. I followed a few minutes later and found her staring at her phone in the bathroom mirror, smiling faintly. When she noticed me, the smile vanished. Can I help you? She asked. I stood there, heart pounding for no concrete reason. No, just checking in. She sighed like I'd interrupted something sacred. Eric, you really need to relax. Relax. I went back downstairs and sat in the dark living room. For the first time, I allowed myself to connect the dots instead of dismissing them. Password change. Face-down phone. New wardrobe. Evening absences. Disappearing calendar. Cologne. Deflection. Individually, they were explainable. Together, they formed a pattern. And the pattern pointed somewhere I didn't want to look. I grabbed my laptop and opened our cloud photo library. We've shared one since our honeymoon. Automatic sync. Nothing hidden. I wasn't snooping. I was verifying. At least that's what I told myself. As thumbnails loaded, I felt a slow dread building in my chest. Not because I expected something specific, but because deep down I was starting to believe the hotel charge wasn't the beginning. It was just the first thing I noticed. and I had a growing suspicion that whatever I'd find next wouldn't come with an explanation that could be turned back on me. I didn't find it that night. At least not immediately. The cloud photo library loaded slowly, thumbnails arranging themselves in neat rows, weekend hikes, birthday dinners, random screenshots of recipes Sophia meant to try. Normal life. Our life. For a few minutes, I almost felt foolish. Maybe I had built a narrative out of stress and insecurity. Maybe the hotel charge really was just business travel. Maybe I was about to become the paranoid husband she accused me of being. Then I saw the timestamp. A photo uploaded 3 days ago. The thumbnail was mostly beige, looked like a mirror selfie. I clicked it absent-mindedly. The image expanded. Sophia stood in front of a hotel mirror. She was wearing a black dress I'd never seen before. Not office-appropriate. Not seminar-appropriate. It was fitted, elegant, deliberate. Her hair was down, styled carefully. Makeup done with intention. But it wasn't the dress that made my stomach drop. It was the reflection. Behind her, partially obscured but unmistakable, was a man. His arms wrapped around her waist. His chin resting near her shoulder. His face angled toward her neck. They weren't posed like colleagues. They were comfortable, intimate. The room around them had exposed brick and a tall window with city lights visible outside. I didn't need the metadata to guess the location. But I checked anyway. Location: the Langford House, Chicago. Time: 11:52 p.m. Late check-in. I stared at the screen so long my eyes started burning. I zoomed in. His hand was resting low on her waist. Familiar placement. Familiar ownership. She was smiling. Not the polite smile she used at work events. Not the tight smile she gave me during arguments. This was relaxed. Soft, unguarded, the kind of smile she used to give me. I leaned back in the chair slowly, like sudden movement might shatter whatever fragile illusion I still held. There it was. Not suspicion. Not theory. Proof. My first instinct wasn't anger. It was disbelief. Maybe it was old. Maybe it was staged. Maybe there was context I didn't understand. I checked the upload history, automatically synced from her phone 2 nights ago. She didn't even know it had backed up. That realization hit almost as hard as the photo itself. She hadn't hidden it, not because she didn't care, but because she assumed I'd never look. Or maybe because she believed I'd never question her again after being labeled clingy. I zoomed in on the man's face. Recognition flickered. I'd seen him before. Corporate mixer last fall. Tall. Confident. A consultant, I think. They'd stood close during conversation. I remember noticing it but dismissing it as professional networking. Now I remembered something else. How she laughed a little louder when he spoke. How he'd kept his hand on the small of her back as he passed behind her. At the time, I told myself not to be insecure. Now I realized insecurity and intuition aren't the same thing. I closed the laptop and sat there in silence. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that feels unnatural. Like the air itself knows something you don't want to admit. Upstairs, I could hear her moving around. Drawers opening. Water running. My wife. The woman I built a decade of life with. The woman who called me clingy for noticing a hotel charge. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, our neighborhood looked exactly the same as it always had. Streetlights glowing. A dog barking in the distance. Nothing had changed. And everything had. I didn't confront her that night. Not because I was weak. Because I needed to see it with my own eyes. The next day, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Sophia left at 8:15 a.m., dressed sharply, phone pressed to her ear as she stepped into the car. I waited 10 minutes. Then I followed. I kept distance, far enough to avoid suspicion but close enough not to lose her. She drove past her office exit. My chest tightened. Instead of downtown Minneapolis, she headed toward the interstate. Southbound. Chicago wasn't on the itinerary today, but that didn't mean she wasn't meeting someone closer. After 20 minutes, she pulled into a boutique hotel near the river. Smaller than the Langford House. Still upscale. My hands were steady on the steering wheel. I parked across the street. She stepped out of the car. He was already there. Same man. Same posture. Same ease. He smiled when he saw her. She smiled back the way she used to smile at me when I came home early from work. They hugged. Not a quick side hug. Full embrace. His hands lingered at her lower back. I felt something inside me go completely still. No more denial. No more reinterpretation. They walked into the lobby together. I sat there for 5 full minutes before getting out of the car. I wasn't storming in. I wasn't screaming. I just needed to confirm what my eyes already knew. Inside the lobby, the lighting was warm and discreet. I kept to the side, pretending to check my phone. I watched them at the reception desk. Sophia signed something. The receptionist handed over a key card. One room. They didn't look nervous. They looked practiced. As they walked toward the elevator, he placed his hand at her waist again. Possessive. Familiar. The elevator doors closed. I didn't move. There are moments in life where your brain tries to protect you by disconnecting emotion from observation. This was one of them. I noted details like I was evaluating a construction site. Posture. Body language. Timing. I walked out of the hotel calmly. Back in my car, I sat with both hands resting on the steering wheel. The affair wasn't emotional speculation. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was active, ongoing, and deliberate. The hotel in Chicago hadn't been a one-time lapse. It had been part of a pattern, a system. As I drove home, one thought kept repeating in my head. She didn't just betray me. She rewrote the story to make me the unstable one for noticing. And that realization hurt more than the image of his hands on her waist. Because it meant the deception wasn't just physical. It was strategic. By the time I pulled into our driveway, the sun was high, casting long shadows across the lawn. Our house looked exactly as it always had. But I understood something now with complete clarity. The foundation I thought was solid had been hollow for months. And she knew it long before I did. I didn't confront her when she got home that evening. That might sound weak. It wasn't. It was strategic. By the time she walked through the front door, I had already shifted from hurt husband to observer. My emotions were still there, raw, sharp, but they were contained. Focused. She stepped inside like any other Thursday. Heels off near the entryway. Bag dropped on the bench. A quick glance toward the kitchen. "You're home," she said, mildly surprised. Yeah, that was it. No accusation. No tremor in my voice. She studied me for half a second, maybe sensing something different, but then she moved past it. "How was your day?" "Productive." Technically true. I'd spent the afternoon pulling financial records. Not to obsess over her spending, but to map patterns. The Chicago hotel. The Riverfront Hotel. A dinner reservation I'd missed 2 months ago because of a late site inspection. I was building a timeline, because if she was capable of orchestrating deception this calmly, then I needed to operate with equal control. Dinner that night was silent. Not tense. Just empty. She scrolled through her phone between bites. Face down when she set it aside. The irony was almost impressive. Afterward, she went upstairs early. "I'm exhausted," she said. I stayed in the living room, staring at the dark television screen long after the house quieted. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I ignored it at first. Then it buzzed again. And again. 3 times. Finally, I answered. "Eric Hudson?" a male voice asked. "Yes. This is David Chun from Internal Compliance at North Point Infrastructure." My stomach tightened. North Point was the firm I'd worked with on the municipal pipeline expansion. High-profile contract. Competitive bid. "Yes," I repeated. "We received an anonymous report alleging irregularities in your oversight approvals." I felt the ground shift slightly. "I'm not sure what you're referring to. There are claims that proprietary cost data may have been shared externally before finalization." The silence on my end stretched too long. "Mr. Hudson?" he prompted. "I've never shared confidential data," I said carefully. "We'll need you to come in tomorrow. You're being temporarily removed from active projects pending review." Removed. Pending review. Anonymous complaint. The timing was too precise. Who filed it? I asked. I'm not authorized to disclose that. Of course not. After I hung up, I sat motionless. Sophia worked in corporate strategy consulting. She had access to firms bidding against North Point. The man from the hotel. Consultant. I felt something colder than anger settle in. This wasn't just an affair. It was proximity to my professional world. Had conversations at dinner been repeated elsewhere? Had I unknowingly provided insight? I'm careful, painfully careful, with confidential material. But casual comments about project phases, vendor hesitations, bid timelines. In the wrong context, that information had value. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I attended the compliance meeting. They were professional, neutral, but the undertone was clear. Suspicion. We have evidence that a competing consulting group secured unusually precise projections on our infrastructure bids, David said. Coincidence doesn't imply misconduct, I replied. No, but we're obligated to investigate. I was escorted out of the building without my laptop, without access credentials. Just like that, 15 years of professional reputation sat in limbo. When I got home, Sophia was in the kitchen. She looked startled to see me mid-morning. You're not at work? Administrative review, I said evenly. Her posture shifted. About what? Anonymous complaint. Contract irregularities. Her face went still. Too still. That's ridiculous, she said quickly. You're the most by-the-book person I know. I watched her carefully. Her reaction wasn't outrage. It was calculation. Do you know anything about North Point's recent competitors? I asked. She blinked. What does that have to do with anything? Just a question. I consult for multiple firms, Eric. I don't keep tabs on your specific contracts. That wasn't what I asked. Over the next few days, the unraveling accelerated. Friends who used to drop by stopped texting back. A neighbor I'd helped with a renovation avoided eye contact. I heard through a colleague that concerns about my ethics had circulated informally before the official complaint. Prepared ground. Strategic positioning. Sophia remained composed, detached, almost inconvenienced. This stress isn't good for you, she said one evening. Maybe you need time away from high-pressure roles. The suggestion landed like a blade. You mean removed from them? I'm just saying maybe you've been stretched too thin. Stretched thin. Clingy. Insecure. Overthinking. The pattern repeated. Deflect. Reframe. Minimize. 3 days later, she sat across from me at the dining table and slid a manila envelope toward me. I spoke to an attorney, she said calmly. I didn't touch it. I think we both need space. Space. The word again. I'm filing for divorce. There was no tremor in her voice. No visible guilt. On what grounds? I asked. I felt emotionally pressured for months. The constant questioning. The monitoring. It's unhealthy. Monitoring. The accusation nearly made me laugh. You mean noticing hotel charges? You're proving my point, she said flatly. I looked at her. Really looked at her. The woman I loved had become someone clinical. Strategic. Prepared. How long have you been planning this? I asked. She didn't answer directly. It's been building. That wasn't an answer. That was confirmation. Later that night, I opened the cloud drive again. Not photos this time. Documents. Buried in her synced folders were consultation agreements dated 6 months back. Legal inquiries. Asset assessments. Financial projections. She had been preparing exit strategies while calling me clingy for asking questions. The realization didn't break me. Clarified everything. The affair wasn't an emotional accident. It was part of a larger pivot. Professional overlap. Competitive firms. Anonymous complaint. And me positioned as unstable. As controlling. As ethically questionable. The foundation hadn't just cracked. It had been methodically hollowed out. And I had been standing on it the entire time, believing I was the one causing the tremors. By the end of that week, I wasn't just facing a collapsing marriage. I was facing the erosion of my career. And for the first time since I saw that hotel charge, I understood something fully. This wasn't chaos. It was choreography. When the divorce papers hit the table, something inside me shifted completely. Up until that moment, I was reacting, collecting proof, absorbing damage, trying to understand how everything collapsed so quickly. But once I saw the legal documents already drafted, already structured, already anticipating asset division and reputational positioning, I realized something simple. She hadn't reacted to our marriage falling apart. She had prepared for it. And preparation implies foresight. That night, while Sophia slept in the guest room, I sat in my office with every financial record I could access open across 2 monitors. I wasn't looking for emotional evidence anymore. I was looking for patterns, consulting payments, corporate affiliations, timeline overlaps. 6 months ago, around the same time she changed her phone password, Sophia's firm had taken on a consulting contract with a strategy group advising infrastructure bidders in the Midwest. The name of the firm made my stomach tighten. Harbridge Advisory. I'd heard of them. They had recently secured a major municipal contract in Illinois, one that North Point had been positioned to win. I pulled up archived bid data from public disclosures. Harbridge's projections on cost overruns and material sourcing had been unusually precise. Uncomfortably precise. Precise enough to anticipate weaknesses in North Point's early phase modeling. Weaknesses I had discussed at my own dinner table. Never confidential documents. Never files. But strategic vulnerabilities. Timeline concerns. Supply chain assumptions. The kind of details someone married to a project engineer might overhear without even trying. My chest felt tight, but my mind was clear. I searched Sophia's synced email for Harbridge. There it was. Dozens of threads. And one name repeated frequently. Daniel Mercer. The man from the hotel. Title: Senior External Consultant, Harbridge Advisory. I leaned back slowly. Daniel wasn't just a colleague. He was directly tied to a firm benefiting from the same contracts my oversight influenced. That wasn't circumstantial anymore. That was proximity with consequence. I printed several emails, nothing explicit, nothing that would scream conspiracy, but enough to show overlapping timelines between her consulting discussions and key bidding phases. Then I found something worse. A calendar invite titled, Strategic Debrief. Informal. Location: the Langford House, Chicago. 3 days before North Point's final proposal revision. I stared at the screen. Strategic debrief. Informal. At 10:30 p.m. My pulse slowed instead of racing, because now the shape of it was visible. I wasn't just collateral damage in an affair. I may have been an information source. Unwitting, unaware, but useful. The anonymous complaint about my irregularities suddenly felt less random. If I were removed from oversight, scrutiny shifts inward. Focus on me. Away from external gains. The next morning I made a call. Not to a divorce lawyer. To an independent auditor I'd worked with 5 years earlier on a transportation compliance case. His name was Martin Alvarez. Meticulous. Quiet. Relentless. When I explained the situation in measured, factual terms, no emotional embellishment, he didn't interrupt. When I finished, he said one sentence. You need documentation before you confront anything. I'm not confronting, I replied. I'm verifying. Good. Then start by separating personal from professional data immediately. I spent the day transferring every personal financial record into a secured account under my name only. Not hiding assets. Just isolating what was legally mine prior to marriage and what I could protect until proceedings clarified division. Sophia texted mid-afternoon. We need to keep this civil. Civil. The word almost made me laugh. When she came home that evening, she looked composed. Controlled. I hope you're not trying to make this harder than it needs to be, she said, setting her keys down. Harder for who? I asked calmly. For both of us. There was no tremor in her voice. No shame. I studied her face carefully. You've been consulting lawyers for months, I said. She paused, but only briefly. I needed clarity. Before or after Chicago? Her jaw tightened. This is exactly what I mean, Eric. You fixate. Fixate. There it was again. Every legitimate question reframed as obsession. I didn't push further, because I didn't need her admission anymore. I had documentation. Over the next week, Martin reviewed bidding timelines alongside Sophia's consulting contracts. He found nothing illegal in isolation, but he found alignment, precise alignment. Harbridge secured 2 major contracts within weeks of Sophia's informal strategy sessions with Daniel Mercer. North Point lost both, and I was removed from oversight immediately after. Coincidence exists, but patterns matter. Then Martin uncovered something that tightened everything. An internal Harbridge memo referencing field-informed projection calibration. Field-informed. That phrase isn't corporate jargon. It's operational language. Language used by engineers, by project leads, by people like me. I felt my stomach drop again. Not from heartbreak this time, but from realization. Whether she intended it or not, whether she consciously extracted insight or simply relayed casual information in conversation, my professional environment had been breached through proximity. And when the dust settled, I was the one under investigation. That night, I sat alone in the house that was technically still ours. Sophia was out, no explanation offered, none requested. I walked through each room slowly. The dining table where we once planned vacations. The couch where we binge-watched documentaries. The kitchen island where I'd first noticed the Chicago charge. Every memory felt like evidence now. Not of love, of miscalculation. I returned to my office and opened one final file. A property valuation report. The house had appreciated significantly. If sold before formal divorce proceedings finalized, the equity division would shift in ways that protected my liquidity. I stared at the numbers. Then I made a decision. No confrontation. No dramatic exposure. No desperate reconciliation. Just quiet withdrawal. I would gather everything necessary. I would accept the job offer from Phoenix that had been sitting unanswered in my inbox for 2 weeks. And I would remove myself from the board entirely. Not as retaliation, as preservation. The next morning, I sent the acceptance email. Relocation package included. Start date, 6 weeks. I walked into the kitchen where Sophia was pouring coffee. I accepted a position out of state, I said evenly. Her hand froze mid-pour. What? Arizona. Infrastructure lead. You can't just decide that. I just did. For the first time since this began, her composure cracked. This is impulsive. No, I replied calmly. It's measured. She stared at me like she was recalculating variables she hadn't anticipated. And in that moment, I realized something quietly powerful. She had prepared for divorce. She had prepared for asset division. She had prepared for reputational positioning. But she hadn't prepared for me to stop reacting. And that changed the equation entirely. I didn't argue. I didn't threaten. I didn't expose anything publicly. I gathered documentation, emails, timelines, financial records, and handed everything to my attorney and Martin. I separated my personal accounts, listed the house, and accepted the relocation package to Arizona. Sophia tried to frame it as emotional instability, but I stayed calm. Every response was measured, every step documented. By the time divorce proceedings formally began, I had already secured a new role, transferred assets legally, and cleared my name through independent review. North Point reinstated my credentials quietly. I didn't fight her. I simply stepped out of the blast radius. 3 months later, I was in Phoenix leading a transit expansion project when she called. Regulatory scrutiny had started around Harbridge. Questions were surfacing. She sounded different, less composed, less certain. "Can we talk?" she asked. I let the phone ring twice before answering. "There's nothing left to say," I told her. The day she called me clingy for noticing a fact was the day I started leaving. I gave her space exactly like she wanted. I just didn't leave room for myself in her life anymore.